Here at Cardinal News, we believe facts matter, and so does your support. As an independent, nonprofit newsroom, we're committed to bringing you in-depth, fact-based reporting about Southwest and Southside Virginia. It's the kind of reporting you won't find anywhere else. If our stories have informed, inspired, or even surprised you this year, consider supporting our work. Every contribution helps keep this kind of local news strong. You can give today at cardinalnews.org/membership. Hello and welcome to the Cardinal News of Virginia, a podcast from Cardinal News. We're a nonprofit independent newsroom serving Southwest and Southside Virginia at cardinalnews.org. I'm Lisa Rowan, filling in for Dutchie Jesse. The Cardinal podcast is sponsored by Muneris, serving communities with expert group benefits and Medicare solutions. Today, we are joined by Samantha Verrelli, a Cardinal reporter covering the Roanoke Valley. Samantha, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good. We are talking today about an article you wrote. It's called Riverdale Shut Off Water to Fire Suppression System a year before Noke Vanco went up in flames. City and fire officials knew the whole time. So let's start with this. For those who aren't familiar with this industrial center in Roanoke, tell us about Riverdale and the fire that took place there in April.
Yeah, so Riverdale is about a 125-acre industrial center. Originally housed the American Viscose plant, which closed back in 1958, but since then has kind of operated as an industrial center with tenants doing various, usually using it as a warehouse space, a lot of metal workers, that kind of thing. Ed Walker, who is a well-known developer in Roanoke, bought the property back in 2023, had a deal with Roanoke City for $10 million that they pledged. He pledged another $50 million. And the goal was to turn it into a neighborhood of sorts, kind of a creative arts center for the city.
So tell us about the fire that took place there in April. This was a big event with lots of damage.
Yeah, so Noke Vans Co. is a customized van company owned by the Van Blaricom couple and Josh Yurton. And they had a warehouse within Riverdale where they housed all their vans and their warehouse equipment. And a van actually caught fire in April and ended up taking down the entire building. Millions of dollars in damage. They were out of business for a bit. They are now back up and running, but yeah.
Okay. So this is a company that does custom vans for like what we know as like van life. People who are going camping or living in their vans, really like high-end customizations. Mm-hmm. Were there other businesses also damaged in this fire, or was it primarily at Noke Vans?
It was primarily at Noke Vans.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they dealt with the brunt of the damage. We don't typically cover events like fires for Cardinal News. It's sort of outside of our scope, but how did this particular event catch your eye in the aftermath?
Yeah, I had gotten a tip about the origin and cause report, which is basically what the fire department puts together to show how the fire happened and the damage that it gives an estimate of how many millions of dollars of damage there was. In the origin and cause report, which was prepared by an assistant fire marshal, there was a line that said that a post indicator valve was in the closed position on the property. A post indicator valve is basically a switch that allows the water to go to fire suppression in a building. So the sprinklers, that kind of thing. That is where that started. The report also said that firefighters had to connect to a hydrant 900 feet away from the fire, which seemed a little unusual. So that's really where I got started and why I dug deeper into this.
Okay. So talk us through what you learned about the timeline of the fire suppression issues in this facility, because we have on our article that you wrote, we have a sort of a graphic that shows like the short version of the story. And this issues date back to February of 2024. So you have sort of a year and a half of issues before this fire took place. And then you go through key events in your article. So take us through sort of the short version of this for people wondering, what was the issue here with the fire suppression system and why did it go on for so long?
Yeah. So the short timeline that I gathered from all the documents I had requested and records I received was that as early as February 2024, at least the, at the time, city manager of Roanoke, which was Bob Cowell, and current fire chief knew that the water was turned off at Riverdale. Later, about 2 weeks later, Roanoke Fire conducted a complaint investigation, which showed that this was accurate for all of Riverdale. There was no water to any of the fire suppression systems at any of the buildings. So it wasn't just about Noke Vans. They have dozens and dozens of tenants there who were all operating without any fire suppression active in their buildings.
And they wouldn't have known this, right? Because if you had turned on the water in, say, the bathroom in your space, like that plumbing water was operating fine. It was just this system that if you didn't know it was turned off, you have no idea.
Right, totally different from a regular water system for sinks or anything like that.
Okay.
This is just water to the fire suppression. So again, your sprinklers connecting to fire hydrants, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So in July 2024, a fire inspector with the fire department wrote to that the city planning manager and the water authority had submitted a request for capital improvement funds. That kind of raised some questions as to whether or not the city was going to help pay for this remediation of the water lines. And again, that's something that there were a lot of questions that were unanswered at the end of this reporting because the city didn't comment. The developer of the property didn't comment. So as far as whether or not those funds were received or not is still a question that I am asking. But anyway, so after that, the fire happened in April. In June, the current city manager, Val Marie Turner, had emailed the fire chief, basically said, hey, I went to Riverdale. I see there's a lot of businesses operating here and there's no water suppression or water to the fire suppression. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do? And she requested a remediation plan. So July 7th of this year, Riverdale released a statement to first Cardinal News and then other media outlets basically saying that Riverdale workers had shut the water off and that they had intended to tell Noke Van Co. and tenants, and they couldn't find the receipts that they had actually notified people. Kind of end of the timeline is this July. Riverdale, or Noke Van Co. is in a new building in Riverdale, operating as usual, just trying to get back on their feet.
Okay. So this is something that you had a ton of documents. And I know this because I saw you working with them and losing your mind at one point trying to sort through them. This is a process that took you months to research. It took you back and forth to get the documents through Freedom of Information Act, Virginia law. Tell us about the process of requesting these documents and figuring out like what in there was useful to you in understanding what had happened here.
Yeah. I would put the documents that I got into two categories, kind of email correspondence and fire inspection reports. The majority, I want to say I got around 700 or 800 pages of documents that I read through the Freedom of Information Act. The majority of that was fire inspection reports. So I had requested anything basically back from when Ed Walker bought Riverdale, any kind of investigations that the fire department had conducted. And that was where I started getting into finding out that this was the entire complex and not just a couple buildings that were out, finding other violations like not having records on site or sprinklers that hadn't been inspected since 2016. The emails were helpful on a different front because I was able to see who knew what when. The city manager had expressed concerns. There were multiple instances where city leaders had said very point blank, like, this is dangerous, and this one area is at high risk, this other area is at high risk. So they were both helpful kind of in their own ways, but they also raised more questions that I had had even before I got those documents. And the city had cited an active investigation, wasn't going to answer further questions. So there was really only so much I could do from the requests, but the majority of the reporting is based off of those FOIA requests.
And we were talking before we recorded, it cost at least $300 to get those records because by law, agencies can charge you for the cost of searching for and providing copies of these records. Did you have any issues with requesting these records in the city not wanting to give them to you because of like an ongoing investigation? I feel like that's an issue I have sometimes when I'm working on something.
Not that I recall, just because everything was like emails and the fire inspection reports. It was kind of tough to figure out what I needed to ask and what to ask for. I knew that the city manager was going to be important, but we had turnover of our city managers within this time period. So it was kind of tricky to figure out what, and I probably could have found out more with 100 other FOIA requests, but just with the few that I did, I was still able to pull so much information.
Yeah, yeah. What about the other tenants at Riverdale? Even though they didn't deal with the damage from this fire, they still have been operating without this working fire suppression system. Were tenants willing to talk to you about this?
Not many were. I reached out to multiple current tenants, some of which weren't willing to talk, some of which I'd get on the phone with them. They'd be like, "What are you talking about? What fire suppression issues?" So it was really a mixed bag there. I did talk to a lot of former tenants who had been there before Ed Walker even bought the building. A couple of them, one of them I have cited in my story, said, "We knew about this. We had fire extinguishers every 20 feet for this reason." So it was really a mixed bag. Some people were kind of shocked to hear about this. Some people had known it was a problem for decades, and some people just didn't want to talk about it.
You had mentioned previously that Noke Vans is back open. They're in a different part of Riverdale, and they are operating. But because this fire suppression system is still out of order, what does that mean for sort of the risk for this business? Like, can they get insurance coverage with this sort of situation?
Yeah, so Justin Van Blaricom, he's who I primarily talk to. He's one of the owners of the company. He is going to be in battles with insurance for a long time because to the insurance company, it was unclear as to if he knew or not that this was an issue. And he was trying to prove that they didn't know because through that July statement from Riverdale, they were not told that the fire suppression had been cut off. So they are currently in a different building in Riverdale. In order to get a temporary certificate of occupancy, they had to put up a firewall and install 2 alarm systems. But they are there for the time being. As far as insurance, Justin had said something along the lines of we're at step 2 of what feels like 100 to me. So it's going to be a long journey for them to finish this all out with insurance.
Okay. And so is this a story that you're continuing to follow? Like, obviously, you are an expert in fire suppression systems now after all of this, but are there further developments that you're expecting that you're keeping an eye on?
I will definitely be keeping an eye on. I don't know if any of this is going to end up in court. From a number of different parties could bring this to court. And so I really, at this point, am just looking on the lookout for fallout and any news, anything from Justin on their insurance issues. And yeah, I'm just waiting to hear about what's next because I still haven't heard from the city much or the developer of the property.
Yeah, and I'm sure that makes it a bit harder too when you don't have good lines of communication through those parties because of your reporting.
Right.
Then you have to piece things together around the edges and hope that this business owner will continue to talk to you and share information and that sort of thing.
And that was what was tough about this reporting was it's so people-based. It affects a lot of people, but no one wanted to talk about it. It really showed me how important freedom of information requests are and just doing your own research. I now know a lot about post-indicator valves and fire watches and all of these systems that I had never even heard of that I had to quickly become an expert on.
Yeah, yeah. How did you, bone up on those topics, right? I think I remember at one point you had called some other, fire chief in another jurisdiction to ask some questions about how things work. Am I remembering that correctly?
Justin Biller, he's a former Virginia State Fire Marshal, had helped me out with a lot of the general questions. So what is a post-indicator valve? What is a fire watch? And just for extra information, a fire watch is basically exactly what it sounds like. They need to have someone monitoring the property 24/7 if the fire suppression systems are not functioning properly.
Got it.
So that was another question that I never really got answered was, is Riverdale conducting a fire watch? It was something that they would not answer, the city could not answer. But a lot of these questions, even though generally they were really just about processes and systems, the city wouldn't answer them because it was still connected to that active investigation. So he was a huge help, that expert that I had talked to. But a lot of this was me just researching fire code on my own, watching videos, a lot of independent research.
Well, if people want to learn more about what you're working on or offer themselves as subject matter experts, how can they get in touch with you, Sam?
They can email me at samantha@cardinalnews.org. My cell phone number is also on the website, so they can shoot me a text or call me through that.
Y'all just out here giving out your phone numbers. The number of times y'all give out your phone numbers on this show.
Preferably email.
Yeah, okay. I'm like, go find my phone number. Good luck. Sam, thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you, Lisa.
And thank you for listening to the Cardinal News of Virginia. Thanks to our sponsor, Muneris, to Sean Eddy of Eddy Alexander for production support, and to Cardinal News' own Zach Shelton. Read all of our paywall-free local news coverage at cardinalnews.org. I'm Lisa Rowan. Take care now.